Hey Ken, this is Greg. It's Wednesday, March the 2nd, the year 2022. And we're starting a brand new book here, which you just told me today that you finished reading the book, so you're going to be well ahead of the curve here I don't really, about what we're doing here. I'm really uncertain, let's put it that way. I'm really uncertain about the direction I'm going to go in it. I could teach To Kill a Mockingbird, unconsciously if I needed to. This is a book that, obviously I talk to my kids about, and we discuss this quite frequently during class. However, I'm just going to go ahead and start today. This covers the first 4 chapters. You can probably tell I'm a little hoarse today. I was pressed into service as a public address announcer at our state basketball first round tournament that we had last night, just at the last minute, and I had to announce 2 games, and it ended up being a little hoarse. I've announced for years, and I couldn't even tell you how many years I've announced, but I announced my retirement last spring just because I was getting older, my voice was getting a little bit weaker, and it just took me too long to recover from a night out. But I went to our school's ball game last night, and I noticed that they didn't have an announcer there. The athletic director was going to do all the announcing, and it's a big tournament. It's a big responsibility, a lot of responsibilities on his part. And I was sitting right there, and I just looked at him and I said, "Hey, all you do is ask me. I've been glad to announce." So anyway, I became the announcer last night for last night and the rest of the tournament as well. But I'm a little bit hoarse today. I'm just really, again, age as much as anything, just really, just really struggling a little bit to be loud enough. And I'm sure you can hear me here. But let's talk about the book Holes. Interesting book. And I think you told me you've already seen the movie as well. Just like most things, there's things in the book that's not in the movie. But I think the movie is fairly faithful to the book. I'm not really exactly sure. Unlike To Kill a Mockingbird, I knew everything that was missing from the book. I'm not really sure about this one. But let's just cover the first 4 chapters today. The very first thing that and I'm sorry, I started on the wrong page. This is what I wanted to start. It's the most recent book cover. You can tell these are characters from the movie. That's whatever. What was Zeroni? What was Hector? Hector and the main character, whatever his name is, my guess. Oh, Stanley. Stanley and Hector, right there. So, whoops, wrong way. Anyway, I want to talk to you first of all. This is trying to think of the correct term. A story within a story. This is actually has like 3 different subplots that are going on, but they're as you get to the end of the book, you find that they intertwine, they all connect. And this story, the things that are told are long range, in their telling, and long range in their effects. I started out with this. This is not from the book. This is actually from a murder mystery that I'd read one time by Agatha Christie. And it says, "Some sins cast long shadows." And the simple explanation for that is some of the things that we do, some of the things that happen that we're involved in our lives, they have consequences that are sometimes long-term. And of course, we're not talking about forgiveness. We're talking about the natural consequences of things. I'm sure you can think of plenty of examples of people that you've known, but I'm thinking of a story, not in my life, but it was in a neighbor's life where a young girl was driving. She was speeding. She lost control of the car. The car rolled over. Her boyfriend was sitting in the passenger seat, and the window was open, and as it rolled, his body kind of fell out and then rolled over on him and decapitated him. Well, could she be forgiven of that? Well, of course. That happened a long, long time ago. Will she ever forget it? Probably not. A person who commits a crime and goes to prison for it, they can, while in prison or even before, I mean, they can, come to the knowledge of Jesus and have their sins forgiven, but that doesn't mean the consequences of their actions are just going to automatically go away. They might remain in prison, for a long time. But you know what I'm talking about. Some sins cast long shadows. Some things that we do in this natural world of ours, this fallen world, they have long-ranging and long-running consequences for them. I think of the story, the story in the Bible of David and Bathsheba. I think I mentioned that for To Kill a Mockingbird as well. David, Psalm 51, created me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, take not your Holy Spirit from me. The psalm there, David was forgiven, the Lord forgave him, but there were still consequences that occurred, because of his sin. Long-range stories have always fascinated me. That's just the way I'm wired. I think in the story of the Bible, the story of two stories. First of all, the story of Jacob going to live with to live with his mother's relatives, Laban, and he worked there for 20 years. But when he left, he was on the outs with his brother Esau. And during that 20 years that Jacob was gone, the Lord worked and set things right so that when Jacob returned, Esau was no longer wanted to kill him. And in the process, the Lord made Jacob a very wealthy man and gave him a lot of power and influence, in the land that he had moved to. I also think of the story of Joseph going down to Egypt when he was 17 years old, stayed there 13 years. He was basically a prisoner most of those years, until he was promoted, became second command in all the land of Egypt. And it's twice at the end of the book of Genesis there, he's talking to his brothers because his brothers are afraid he's going to seek revenge on them. And I'm paraphrasing this, it's not exact, word for word, but he said, don't fret, don't be upset. It wasn't you who sent me here. It was God who sent me here so that our family could survive, could stay alive. And, again, that's a long-range, a long-term story. The same way this book holds has a couple of long-term stories in them as well that they interact and they intertwine together, and all the stories together comprise this one big story. This book has two main relationships in it. The first one is political, again, just like in To Kill a Mockingbird. Political being defined as who has power and who doesn't, who's in control, who's not, who is the ruler, who is the ruled. The second one is economic relationships. You've already finished the book, so you know who I'm talking about, Trout Walker and the warden, and what drove them. That was the driving force in her life and in her dad's life. They wanted the wealth, from Kissing Kate Barlow. And so those are the two main things that kind of drive this story. As I mentioned on a weekly basis to my students, every story, every work of fiction has to have a conflict in it. If there's no conflict, there is no story. And the conflict is, again, finding the treasure of Kissing Kate Barlow, as well as Stanley trying to navigate his way through this terrible life that he's been unjustly sent to, and by some evil people, wicked people who are ruling over him. All right, this pig stealing. The Yelnats family, they want to blame everything on their pig stealing. I got the ellipsis there because I don't know the exact words, but I guess it's Stanley's great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather, whichever one it is, the one from the old country. And they blame everything on him. And, in the form of a family curse. He has cursed us for the rest of our lives. I'm not going to tell you. Well, you already know. I'll wait till we find out what all the curse, until we read it, until I read it, to get out what was involved in the curse. But the Yelnats family has definitely been struggling and living under oppression for a couple, 3 or 4 generations now. And everything they do turns out wrong. Just like Stanley, he didn't steal what he was accused of stealing. Hector Zeroni did. But Stanley just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Stanley's dad making, the anti-smell thing out of old tennis shoes. But nothing ever seems to work right for them. And they're poverty-stricken, the whole family is, and they're not well thought of, and they're just, they're low down. So that curse, supposed curse, by the pig-stealing relative, it has continued and gone unabated. And of course, the end of it. You know what finally breaks that curse. Goes on for 100 years, and this produces cause and effect again in the Yelnats family. Again, no matter what they try, no matter what they attempt to get accomplished, they're just battling uphill the entire time, and they just can't get things right, and they can't get on their feet, and it's just nothing is going to go right for them. All right, what I put up there at the top, some sins cast long shadows. Well, there's long shadows in this book. You can see the picture I've got here. I've got 5 things as of right now. I've got that I thought of 5 things that are casting long shadows. And they cover the book. Remember on To Kill a Mockingbird, I had the bookends, Boo Radley and coming out and Jim breaking his arm. Those were the bookends to that story. And these long shadows encompass this book from the beginning to the end. The family curse. This character named Kissin' Kate Barlow. The yellow spotted lizard. I mean, you read some of these at the early part and think, what in the world could a yellow spotted lizard have to do with anything? Of course, it plays a wonderful part at the end of the book. All right, and then the great grandfather surviving. Kissin' Kate, didn't kill him, and he survived out in that wilderness. As we haven't encountered yet. God went to God's thumb, and the story with the onions, and I didn't even put Sam in there yet. But again, these like an arch over the entire book. And then the last thing I have up here is Camp Green Lake itself. And at one time it says in the early going of the book, this was the largest lake in Texas, and now it's just a dry lake bed, and there's nothing more to it. So again, without the understanding that everything in this book is working together over a period of 100 years, we can, my students anyway, sometimes get lost. They can't see the plot for the plot. They get lost in the plot and the minute details of the plot instead of taking the big picture, big overview. Of course, you've never read it before. You can't take the big picture. You just have to assume that everything that's in there has a reason. And this is something I preach to my kids all the time. I say, guys, people who are good authors, who write books well, they don't put stuff in at random just to confuse you or it's non-essential to the book. And again, at this point, when we read this book this year, earlier in the year, I mean, these were all 5 unrelated things that had happened in the early going. But again, as you know, they all play a part in unraveling this story. So I think that's all I have for you today. I don't know how, 10, 15 minutes today, a rather shorter one. But I'm going to go ahead and continue. I'm hopeful to be able to record another one tomorrow. I do have another long day tomorrow. I might just do a couple chapters. They're short chapters, as you know. I might just do a couple chapters, or I might do all 4 chapters. It depends on how late I can stay up tonight. I'm rather tired. I had a long day yesterday. Started at 7 in the morning, and it didn't end until nearly 10 o'clock at night, and I was busy the entire time. I had to fill in places and stuff like that. So, a couple chapters at least, maybe up to 4 chapters tomorrow. So, see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining in, and I'll send you a link. All right, see you.